So what kind of stuff are you wanting to dig into?
Oh man, yeah. So I took a crap earlier today, and during that time, I had my phone, but I'm done with Facebook for a while. So I thought, oh hey, Bobby.
Hello, hello.
Hey, what's up,
Hello.
man?
How's it going? Sorry I'm late.
Oh no, you're fine.
I just had to finish up another phone call.
Gotcha. We're busy people, man.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm busy sitting in my chair a lot right now.
Yeah, I didn't even know. They told me later that you'd gone through surgery and stuff like that.
Yeah, I had open heart surgery a few weeks ago.
That's rough.
So I'm in recovery, but every week's a little better than the week before. So
Good. Happy to see you
Yeah.
get your strength back.
I'm feeling definitely better this week than I did last week. So
Cool. So yeah, John just asked me what kind of stuff I was hoping to dig into, and I hate to like grab you guys right off of getting off of work.
Go for it.
I'm a college student on summer vacation. Like I'll have nothing going on. So what I did is I sat down and wrote a bunch of ideas down, concepts that I had gotten. I don't know if you want to hear kind of my religious story, I guess, kind of how I got to where I'm at right now. I don't know if it really matters. We're all kind of just learning and going.
Time you where you want to go.
All right. Well, I want to take up all your time because I know we got that meeting later on today. But yeah, basically, I was born into the Seventh-day Adventist fold, I'll call it, and Grandpa was pretty high up in the church. Dad was always very strong and hard pressed for religious ideals. And then 18, I took off. Between the ages of 17 and 18, I went to a lot of different churches, kind of trying to find my own way in this walk of religion. Because if there's anything I took away from all the schooling and education I got in religion growing up in the church was God is personal. He's not a denomination. He's not a certain aspect. He's not a perspective. He's all perspectives. He's all. And I kind of took that to heart. But as time goes on, you kind of get rattled by the state of the world and reality set in. And somewhere along the way, I just quit looking. I just quit trying to make sense of it. And I just started making my own sense of it. And took a bunch of philosophy classes, philosophy of religion, morals and ethics, pretty much any philosophical class you can take. I've probably taken it. I love philosophy. And it was interesting for philosophy to be described to me as religion for non-religious people. Mm-hmm. Even in my military career, through the 4 pillars of leadership, when I became a non-commissioned officer, they were saying you have to have faith, you have to have this spiritual side, and that was always my lacking side, and I definitely paid the price for that. But somewhere along the way, a much wiser gentleman than me suggested I put faith in the system, put faith in my country, and my command, in my chosen profession. So that's what it became, and it worked, and it was fine for a while. But now I find myself a civilian amongst a bunch of strangers in a world that is foreign to me. I've been culture shocked more times than I can count on any hand, and I would say that the hardest culture shock is definitely coming back home and realizing that nothing is like what it used to be. And with me and my wife being set up the way we worked really hard to get to where we're at today, and we're super proud of where we are right now. And it's interesting because religion has kind of stormed both of us over the past couple weeks, just kind of reconnecting with John, and a lot of those old questions start to come back to light. A lot of those old ideals that I used to hold very close to my heart are now being questioned again, almost forgotten to time. And it's been interesting because me and my wife have such a beautiful relationship that I've been kind of expunging all of this emotional stuff and all this knowledge and all this information that's being shared now with her. And both of us have now kind of become curious on what it means to be religious, what it means to give yourself to God, and why you have to choose. And I'll tell you right now, she tempted the Lord thy God. She's definitely a sinner going to hell right now. We were in. She finally got some leave, and we went to a hotel. And we were up late at night as Eva was passed out in the bed beside us, and we were just kind of talking about religion, just the two of us together, and what it meant to both of us, and mostly just me talking. And she came up with this idea of grabbing the Bible that was in there and opening to a random page and seeing what God had in store for us. I'm sure you've heard a story very similar to this. I think she watched a movie about it or something. And immediately I'm like, yeah, but I'm smart enough in the religious aspect to know that you're not supposed to tempt him. Like, you're not supposed to try to persuade him. And she said that she had heard something completely different, that God welcomes the challenge, that God accepts the challenges that we give him. So I guess that would be my first question, especially for me and my wife, is what's y'all's take on that? Do we want to challenge God? Because I'm pretty sure I remember thou shalt not somewhere in there about God in the forest.
Do not tempt the Lord thy God.
Right. Yeah. Let's start there. We'll start with that one.
You want to comment on that first, John?
Well, honestly, again, this is just my personal opinion on that idea of choosing a random page and maybe randomizing how I hit a verse. I think the purpose of Scripture was not to be a divining rod kind of thing where I'm just hoping that it'll speak to me randomly, but it is a story of the truth of not only the state of the world since the problem of sin started, but it is the truth about God's dealings with man throughout the span of history. And through all of that, we can find and see his plan to save and rescue us from sin, which is basically self-destructive or self-destroying. So as far as just doing something random like that, I still think that potentially you could land on something that would speak to your heart, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't know that that's the way God wants to interact with us. I think he wants us to dig and search and study, kind of like you do with philosophy or school or whatever, that you're trying to find his thoughts on topics and things that are concerning you. And he does have stuff to say about life. He does have stuff to say about not only what is good for us, but what he has planned for us as individuals. And I think that's something you dig for.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think so too. She turned to a passage in the Bible, by the way. I think it was Old Testament. I'm not sure, but she started reading a verse that whatever, and it was about a sorcerer who turned from his wicked, evil ways to the light of God. And I fucking laughed so hard. It's like, it's over, Ray. You have to choose now. Like, it's done. Gave you your sign. There you go. You wicked sorcerer, Ray.
Oh, well, see, there you go. It was actually a story about somebody way back in ancient days. It had nothing to do with Ray. It had to do with some sorcerer way back.
Yeah.
So at least that's kind of the way I picture.
Well, so the question
things.
I heard you ask, Kenny, was, is it okay to challenge God or to give him a challenge? There is the verse John brought up about not tempting, but not tempting has to do with feeling the need to pressure God to do it wrong. or to sin. God won't do that. So he's just saying, hey, don't even try to talk me into that. But there's other verses that say, for instance, one is, come, let us reason together. That's an invitation to ask questions, to ask hard questions. And we could add to it the verse that says, taste and know that I am good. That, again, an invitation to try him out. So I think there's a difference between, in a mocking way, sort of just jesting about God. That would be more of the don't tempt the Lord your God. But I think she's right that God is excited about the challenge when we're honestly asking him, where are you, who are you, and are you good? So I would never want to discourage her from even exactly open up that Bible with your eyes closed, pick a page, start reading. Of course, if I get to be there when something like this is happening, then what I'm excited about is what we could do in conversation with any verse you're going to pick. Doesn't matter to me which one. We're going to be able to really work with that. Well, so if you have nobody in the room that has any sort of sense of what it's saying, it's still possible to just sort of pick a verse, even God is love, and then both look at each other and go, I wonder what that means, So I think what John is saying is there is an attitude of search to discover that's honest, that's really good. And how much we study or how much we dig will depend on, one, how many questions we have today, and how successful are we at tasting and finding. So one of my example thoughts would be, imagine a smorgasbord of a table. And the sign at the entrance when you came in said, man, the food here is good. All right, well, so there's a challenge in there. Let me taste it and see if it's good. And you could randomly, there's no signs on any of the dishes to tell you what it is. You could randomly pick something and you might not like it at all. That doesn't mean the entire table isn't good though, right? So my only caution would be is when we come to reason with God, when we come to ask questions, let's sample across the board. Let's not just say, well, we read one verse and it totally said the opposite of what we think, so we're just not going to read any more. That would be unfair to the table when we know that, well, I like spinach, you don't. If we both taste the spinach dish, you're not going to like it. Doesn't mean it's not good for us. So I think that's, for me, a simple way to put it. I also, for me, there's a clarification that I think is a little different than what you and I would have learned up as, being trained in the Adventist church, or even if we're Baptist or Methodist. There tends to be this sort of, you have to start with a blind belief that the Bible is the infallible word of God. I discovered that's not true. Jesus is the infallible, capital W-O-R-D. The scripture is humans interacting with the Spirit. I don't mean it's not inspired, but we keep handling it, and what I mean by handling it is we read it, we interpret it.
Right.
Translate it, we retranslate it. And with human handling, it's like a guy who thinks he's a minister and he reads 6 verses, preaches a sermon. He could be totally wrong, but he used 6 verses. Well, in the handling of the scripture, there is fallibility. What I mean by that is a possibility of error, right? Okay. So I'm comfortable and have learned actually to read the writings, which is the scripture, and go, wait a minute, is that verse really right? See, I don't have to start with the premise, it's right, even if I don't believe it. No, I'm actually going to start with, how do I know that's right? For instance, give you an example. Hebrews 9:22 says, without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness. In the NIV, it says that. But if that's true, that means God was unwilling to, or unable to, or legally was restrained from forgiving until there was a dead something. I'm going to tell you, I believe that growing up. It's what I learned in Bible class, and I got A's on the test about all that stuff. And I can tell you that's completely wrong. So I had to go,
I agree.
how come it says that? So I go over to the New King James, or the King James, and it didn't say that. It said, without the shedding of blood, there's no remission. I'm like, remission? I don't even know what that word means, right? So I have to look it up. Turns out remission means like cancer. It stops growing. That's to be in remission. And then full remission is it goes away. Well, so then I did a little more digging into the Greek Greek in Hebrews about what's the meaning deeper behind that. Come to find out, the meaning of the word is really more about healing or rescuing or setting free, which means then that verse is saying without God giving his life, there was no way to free us from the deception or the bond that sin enslaved us into. Well, that makes perfect sense, because then God isn't up there making rules that he can't be forgiving unless there's a dead animal or a dead Jesus. He's saying there's no way to fix this problem that has enslaved us, trapped us, deceived us, and confused us without him living his life on the earth, showing us what the truth is, and ultimately going to the cross, not to earn forgiveness for us, but to show us how complete his love really is. Well, suddenly that verse turns on for me with power. It's like, oh my goodness, that describes an amazing, compassionate, loving God. But the first version I read, no, it troubled me. I'm like, why does God need blood so much? Right? So that's what I mean by it's okay to question it. It's okay to say, I don't necessarily trust that this way of having it written down is perfect. But Jesus is the infallible, meaning everything he showed us was the truth about God. And what I find is it doesn't matter which translation I'm reading. When I'm reading the stories about Jesus, the translations don't mess that up. You can read any and every translation, and they're still really getting the story. Like, they don't change it from Jesus loving the people to him hating the people, right? It doesn't, they don't mess it up that bad.
That's an interesting thing you said right in the beginning. It really struck me, I'll say it, odd. I've never heard that before. So I remember many stories being told and retold, and every time you heard the story, it's like they took a different angle of it, and you got something different out of it. And that always kind of pissed me off in a way, which I think you guys kind of got onto as well, which was, you can get a lot out of the Bible. You can get a lot of reasoning and a lot of logic out of it, and things that you can use personally in your life, or things that you can use as concepts for things you've witnessed throughout your life. But your idea, as far as I understand it, is there is one message to receive from that text. Whereas I feel like when I was growing up and going to all these different churches and stuff, it was multiple things that you get out of it. And whatever you happen to get out of it is whatever the Spirit wanted you to get out of it that time. Hey kitty. So is that what you're saying? The one,
yeah, that's a good addition to what I was explaining, and I agree with that, because if I'm looking for, let's say, life rules,
right?
Let's just pick a page and start reading about life rules. Well, here's a weird one. In the Old Testament, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, there somewhere, it talks about if there's mold in your house and it's discovered, well, you got to go call the priest. And the priest comes, he checks it out, and if it's indeed mold, he's going to close up your house and quarantine it for 7 days. On the seventh day, then you bring a blood sacrifice, a lamb or turtle dove or something, and offer a sacrifice. After you're done, we open up the house, we check to see if the mold is still there. And if it is still there, we burn your house down. I'm like, that's a wacky life rule. And how come we don't do that anymore? If God made this rule, then how come we don't do it? Well, so let me jump away from there and go to what you said, which is there's one message, and that is to understand God, his heart, what he's like, what his spirit, character are. And we see that most clearly in Jesus. So after I learned that out of the Bible, that one message, then I reread that old thing in Deuteronomy there, and here's what I found when I read it again. The house represents me. Mold represents sin. And there's only one thing that can fix that, and it's the life of Jesus Christ, which is represented by the blood. And if that can't fix it, nothing can. So Judas would be an example of that, right? Jesus poured his time, his teaching, his love on Judas, and it didn't fix Judas. So Judas would be an example then of after the blood is poured out for him, his house is still no good. But Peter would be an example of same quarantine, same giving of the blood or the life of Jesus, and it changed it. It fixed the house. And so it's a parable that teaches us the same exact thing that I found in the life of Jesus. Well, now they both connect and they're both saying the same message. But if I try to twist that story about the house into anything else, it's just going to make it look like the Bible is full of stupid rules.
There's a few, I think, but yeah, definitely some strange rules. Definitely, I mean, you're talking about throwing a dead carcass in your house and closing up the doors. I mean, what I take away from that is that the only way to salvation is nothing short of a miracle.
That's right. Exactly right. And see, again, when we read the story about the house that way, it fits with the idea of love and salvation. If we read it as rules we should go back to applying to our modern society during COVID,
not gonna fly. Not gonna fly. Yeah.
Not fly at all. So, and really back then, there's no record of them actually burning a house down. It was a ceremonial law. By ceremony, another way to put it is an acted out play or a representation of the meaning of truth. Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was going to kind of say what you just said, plus add the global thought that God's problem from the beginning has been, how do I teach my children the truth about me? And in the beginning, he had Adam and Eve who had actually spent time with him. So it was probably fairly easy for him to go and say, look, here's the plan of salvation. Here's why it works.
They could tell all their kids, and all the kids could listen and see.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you get to the time of Moses, when you have, the Hebrews who spent 400 plus years in slavery, in captivity, in Egypt, which was, they worshiped heathen gods, and they worshiped all kinds of gods. They worshiped the Nile, they worshiped crocodiles, frogs, all kinds of animals. They were, and so they were surrounded by that kind of thinking for 400 plus years, right? And so their minds are totally confused about who God is and what he's about. And so imagine you trying to teach a 2-year-old about a very specific concept, right? I mean, that's what God was, I think, dealing with. And so he used actual plays. When you're teaching a kid how to tie their shoe, you actually go through the motions, and you make them watch what you're doing and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of that stuff in the Old Testament was intended to be seen as him working to teach the people the truth about him and the truth about how salvation would work.
Kind of like it could be taught to, I like your description of children or people who have no concept of God whatsoever. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I always thought the Old Testament was whack. I thought it was just
A lot of it is.
10,000 people dead, and then the earth opens, and all this crazy stuff. And I was like, God, he was pretty wrathful back then. But now my concept of wrath is all askew because of you two guys. So.
Good.
Yeah. No, I decompressed on my wife after that first one, and she was very interested. But
Cool.
yeah, all right. You want me to keep hammering these questions at you till you slip up? Is that what?
What else you got?
No.
We don't do math problems.
Yeah, I stick away from that. All right. I think this is the biggest question on my mind when I first heard you, Bobby, when you were talking. I've talked to John about this a few times, and I'm tiptoeing around this subject because I'm not really sure what the answer could be. And I'll be honest with you guys. I feel like the best thing for me right now in this spiritual journey or rediscovery is doing it. Getting through and studying and figuring it out. And I'm sure I'll have a lot more questions later on. I hope I don't bug you too much.
No, we love questions.
Yeah. So this is one that I think kind of contrasts with the military side of my life. So I wrote, if there's a time to kill and a time to die, why then are we taught to turn the other cheek? It's a gray area that I've never found logic in, as God clearly wants both. Why is God okay with killing some and completely forgiving others? Then pit us, humans, against a similar conflict. Forgiveness is one thing. Enabling, in my mind, is quite another.
Yeah, good question. You want to do some thoughts on that first, John, or you want me to?
No, go for it. I've talked to Kenny quite a bit about this one, and I like the way you worded it in what you wrote.
I'm a writer. That's what I do.
Yeah, good. So yes, that's one of those verses that it's like, wow, how do you fit that with? He also said, "Thou shalt not kill," which is the question you're putting out there. So I think the first part of it is to understand that God, He created life, right? He breathed into the dirt and made a living soul. So if He were to take my life today, He could bring me back out of the grave tomorrow. If somehow in my being rescued, saved, educated, whatever's needed, if it's helpful to put me into that grave, to smash me with a hammer, to have the earth open up and swallow me, or the sea close you, like with if somehow that is helpful and useful either to my salvation and education or somebody else's, I've had to learn to say, with God, that's not unfair. Because one, He gave us that life in the first place. So God giveth and God taketh away. What's important to understand is that while He has the power to give and take away, He doesn't take away because He's frustrated, or because He lost His temper, or because somehow it's better for Him if He puts these people in the dirt right now, right? He only does things because of the benefit of the individual or the group or humanity as a whole. So sure, when He sends an army, and I mean, He specifically tells David and his army, right, go in there and kill, or to Joshua, every man, woman, child, sheep, cattle, everything, wipe them out. One, I know God is not doing that because He's pissed off. He's not doing that because He's just tired of those heathens. He's not doing that because He's just tired of trying to help them or fix them or save them. Somehow, and I may not be able to answer this in every story yet, but somehow He's doing it for the rescue, the blessing, the saving of both the ones going into the grave as well as the ones wielding the sword.
It almost makes me think that you're talking like He knew that they would end up becoming the end of all things, the end of all time, and He is prolonging the inevitable by circumventing cancer and cutting it out, allowing the body to continue as long as possible until there is no saving anything anymore.
Very, very good perspective. I like that, because that also allows, when we add the God piece to it, that when he cuts the arm off, let's say because of the cancer in it or the gangrene, he's able tomorrow to speak that arm back into existence and have it fully healed, right? But if he's trying to teach me something, I need to learn it. It's not just about whether I have an arm or not. Having an arm or not today is not the end of the world. Me losing my soul, which is why he said, what is the profit of gain the whole world but lose a soul? If your eye caused you to sin, pluck it out. If your arm, cut it off. Well, then it all fits, right? Okay. But what else I have to do with that is realize I don't have the power to give life back. So without direct orders from God himself, I'm not given permission to go out there and take life. Simultaneously, I'm going to hold that God enables civil powers. That would be like the U.S. government, the president, the chief of police, or whatever. He enables civil powers to have rulership over civil authorities. Otherwise, the world's going to, as we can see, is going to go nuts and melt down in a few days. So there has to be some sort of holding it together. Then in the middle of that, I'm just going to call it chaos, war, disasters. In the middle of that, he says, but I'm looking for some people who specifically want to know me, be filled with me, be so connected with me that they will turn the other cheek. They'll learn to love the way Christ loves, to show all the people in the chaos a living reality of what they could have if they gave their hearts and lives to God. And in that, we have kind of two things going on. One is Nebuchadnezzar or Caesar and the wicked civil powers dealing with the wicked people. And do they sometimes hurt, harm, and kill the good people? Yeah, but that's of no consequence to the good people, right? The ones that know God, because they're going to get woke up again and life will continue for eternity. This little blip of a moment is no big deal for them. Now, I don't mean that the wicked or the people that don't know God could even have that perspective yet because they don't know God, but I can have it. And you and I can have it, right? And so to me, that's how they sort of blend together. There is a time to kill. There is a time when God will leave room or give authority and power for the policeman to step in the middle and put a stop to a citizen being harmed, and even harm one of the citizens if that's what it takes to put a stop to it. But that's not the business I'm in anymore. Even if I was before, when we come to know Christ, he's asking us to leave that with the civil powers, which will always be until the earth ends. But you come over here and we're going to put you on a Fishing for Men program, not on a Draw Your Sword Peter program. And that's how they both can exist in the same Bible or the same verse.
It's almost like faith in an authoritarian. I mean, it is faith in an authoritarian. It's the idea that God has allowed these positions of power to be at work. But I guess that's a terrifying thing, at least for me, from my perspective, right, is, I don't know, it kind of makes sense, a lot of what people said. They called it a holy war when we were over there. They said we're fighting against things beyond man. We're fighting against ideals and perspectives and that kind of thing.
Of course, the funny thing about the civil authorities throughout history, it's always a holy war. There's no war that, I mean, I know we know about the Crusades and calling it a holy war, but every war that ever gets fought, both sides have to convince their soldiers that this is for a holier, bigger than just us purpose. Otherwise, they won't go fight. Right. So that's always the trained mentality, whether it is or whether it isn't. I find the one difference is that that mentality didn't seem to be trained by God into Israel. For instance, he taught them that this was about God having dominion over the earth, not man. And so he said, here's how you're going to fight. You're going to put the ark in the front with 12 priests, and then the choir, and you know, every soldier ever trained in the world would say, that's not a good battle plan. That's ridiculous, right? And yet God was trying to say,
God doesn't play by the rules.
Yeah. When I take walls down, it's because I'm in action, not man. When I drive an army out with hornets, I can show you that this can be done without the power of man. And I find it interesting that with Israel, God told them to go to battle, and they said, well, we can't. We don't have any swords and spears and shields. And it's like I can hear God, it's not written in the text, but I can hear God saying, who said anything about swords and spears and shields? I told you go in and I would drive them out. But see, they didn't trust God. So God said, okay, well, you go ahead and you make your spears and shields and you get ready, do what you got to do. And then they go out to battle. In the very first battle with Israel, Moses is over there. He's got his hands up and they're winning. And he's got his hands down and they're losing, which is like God saying, and you think your swords and shields are doing any of this? How can you think that when all it takes to make a difference is Moses' hands up, meaning trust in God, or Moses' hands down took your attention off of God, like Peter sinking in the water instead of walking up.
I always thought that story was so silly. I'm like, get that dude some sticks. You better have kids in rotation, like holding that sucker up, you know. But I like how you just kind of very clearly defined what the point of it was. I like the point of it more than I like the story, I think.
And that's exactly
infuriating. Yeah.
Getting the point is where we find the meaning. Otherwise, we're going to have these conflicts like I see in church all the time where three guys in the pew are sure that we're supposed to do what David did, which is to get our bazookas ready and shoot the police when they show up. And then the other guys are saying, no, we're supposed to be pacifists and turn the other cheek, and they can never agree, and around they go. But when we get the point of all the stories, then it starts really helping us see what God is really after. And that's what I like about when we dive into more Bible study rather than just a few verses here, a few verses there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's where the heart of faith is at, is finding that connection for yourself. It can't be taught to you. It can't be shoved down your throat, no matter how much our parents tried, you know.
Right.
It's interesting. Yeah, I really like that.
Sullen submission always creates the heart of a rebel.
Yeah, damn right.
Along these lines of the Bible and is it trustworthy or is it, what's its meaning? There was another thing I learned years ago, and that was that the Bible itself, meaning the written scripture, is not really enough to convince one of faith. Like people always ask, not just a question about how do I know the Bible is trustworthy, but I remember I was sitting in this is how I learned it. I was sitting in the foyer at the academy. I had graduated from academy a couple years out, and now I was back, and I was talking to students in the academy, and I was reading to one of them out of the book Desire of Ages. I was just telling them, look, what do you think of this? And I read a paragraph, and the girl looked at me and she said, well, I need to tell you I don't believe in Ellen White. And I said, oh, okay, well, I guess you can't. And I put the Desire of Ages down, and I picked up the Bible.
She read the part about masturbation, probably, is what.
Yeah. So I said, that's okay, you can't. I gave her permission that she didn't even have the ability to believe in Ellen White. And I said, okay. So then I picked up the Bible, and I started to read the same exact idea that I was reading out of the book Desire of Ages, but from the Bible. And she sort of looked at me and then hesitantly said, well, I need to tell you I don't believe in the Bible either. Now my training said at that time, wait a minute, you're coming to a Seventh-day Adventist Christian school. You got to at least believe in the Bible. That would have been my normal response. But I said to her, oh, well, that's okay, you can't. And I put the Bible down. And I went on talking a little bit about just the concept of who God was. But the next day she came back. No, I didn't pull her over there. I didn't go, hey, let's talk. She just came over and sat down. And she said, I have a question. I said, okay. So she asked me the question. It was about God. So I started answering her question, and I told her she really liked the answer. So the next day she came back and she did the same thing. Got another question. Now this time when I answered the question, she said, does it say that in the Bible? And I did not say to her, I thought you don't believe in the Bible. No, I said, "Oh yeah, let me show you." And I opened it up and we started reading. And she was amazed. She's like, "Oh wow, that's so cool." And then she had another question, and this went on for a few weeks. Sure enough, pretty soon she said, "Did Ellen White say that?" So now she wanted to know where Ellen White said it in Desire of Ages. And here's my point. What I learned out of that experience was the writings are not what enable us to believe. Meeting Jesus, I can call it face to face. Meeting Jesus, looking into his face and seeing his amazing love. That's what convinces us that's where faith springs from. And again, that's a little bit different perspective than just arguing philosophy out of the book.
Well, philosophy of religion, like lesson one day when she sat down and goes, if you're looking for proof of God, it doesn't exist.
Right.
It's that gray area that we just can't get past. And we talked about fallacies and all that stuff too. Yeah. I again and again, like I'll keep picking on John here. I don't know. I feel like when you hear the truth, you'll know it when you hear it. It's you'll learn it when you hear it. It's weird because I remember John when I was so young and in the beginning of, I would say, my adult walk with religion and God and trying to slam all that stuff around in my head and try to make sense of it. He was kind of finding the same thing, and we had these really cool conversations over these long drives back and forth from his place to mine, and we talked about some really deep stuff. And I think I've always preferred something like this to, welcome, pay your tithe. Now I'm going to give you a 30-minute sermon so that you can go get your pizza in time and all that. Like it's, it just seems so fake to me. Growing up in that environment, it felt like everyone was just going through the motions, and not anyone in the pews actually believed what was being said. But I don't feel that with you guys. I feel like this is a very passionate, sensitive kind of topic, and it means something to you, and it should, because presumably you guys believe, right? Like you're not just pulling one over on me. So it's it's I feel that, and I see that.
Kenny, what's interesting is growing up in the church like we both did.
Yeah.
Ellen White was always kind of a mystery to me, and also the only way she was ever used was to bash me over the head with, you need to do this thing or that thing, and why did you
quit eating meat? No.
Why did you look longingly at that piece of bacon? Shame on you. But
God draws a line right through the deli aisle.
Yeah, exactly. So as I've started to study, one of the things that amazes me is she had the same attitude I did about church.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. Here she is, and I'm reading all these statements from her about how ceremonialism is destroying the church, right? And
I think so too.
She was going after the same things that were, in my mind, a big part of the problem. And I'm like, so how in the heck is the church still doing this, even though God sent this amazing prophet to warn us about these things, and we even quote that prophet all the time, yet we don't hear her when she says things that would require us, here's where I think the rubber meets the road, that would require us to completely change our man-made institutions. Yep. and to allow them to become something that God intended, not something that man built.
Yeah, I think it flourishes in today's society because people expect it of the church. Our concept of church has been written down paragraph by paragraph, so you must have these things, these requirements, or you are not. And I think Western religion, we went from that, well, I'm holier than thou, so you couldn't possibly understand what I'm reading. And now it's, the whole Western movement in religion is anyone can read it, anyone can interpret it, anyone can find their own truth. And it knocked down a lot of those foundations for a lot of people, I think. And we're still struggling, like the guys coming out of Egypt and still holding on to those ideals. I think that's very similar to what we see nowadays.
There's a
Well, in
there's a book
history,
you should.
Oh.
I was just gonna
Right.
say there's a book you should read, Kenny, called Pagan Christianity.
Pagan,
yeah.
all right, let me write this down.
Yeah, you would enjoy that. Kind of works into the history of why we do what we do in church. Why do we
Okay.
have a pulpit? Why do we line our chairs up the way we do?
Why do we have
I mean,
a rank structure? That's
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. So anyway,
Yeah.
sorry, Bobby. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that history also proves that it's not just a particular time or age or culture that does it. Every generation, every time something starts that let's refer to it as sort of grassroots or revival, it turns to personal instead of the formalism. And all it takes is a little bit of time, and humans will build it right back into formalism. Example would be Martin Luther back in the mid 1500s, right? There was a movement that really started to understand some exciting things about God, and that it was righteous by faith, and so on and so on. And then after a while, they turned it into what now we refer to as a Lutheran church that's nothing but formalism, and is totally rejoined officially the Catholic Church. So humans, we tend to take the gifts God gives us that I would call spiritual life and turn it into dead religion. And so dead religion should be avoided at all costs. We should run from it, flee from it. That doesn't mean I'm not going to church Sabbath, because there's a bunch of people still stuck in formalism that might need some help finding a real walk with God. But I know when I was a kid in church, we always talked about that elusive relationship with Jesus, relationship with Jesus. But nobody could actually explain to us how to get it. And some of us were serious about trying. I was one of those. Dedicated a lot of time to trying to figure out how to make it work. And the older I got, the worse it was. And it wasn't until I just threw my hands up in there and said, God, I don't know where you went or what happened, but this is a bunch of garbage. So unless you can show me something real, I'm kind of worn out on this. And it wasn't until then that God started to open up for me what then became a personal learning, reasoning, beginning to understand, and what I now call meet him face to face. I don't have an experience anymore where I wonder, or people might be able to talk me out of it. I know as much as I've met John, and I know John's a real person, and that he's got flesh and bone, and he breathes and he eats. No one can convince me otherwise. And even more so about the man, Jesus Christ. Met him, know him even better than I know John. And there's nothing lacking in what's real. Now, I don't need people to believe that I'm telling the truth when I say that. Right. I don't need to convince them of that, because I already know it. So I'm just here to say, oh, you've never seen blue sky? Well, I could describe it some for you because I've seen it. That's it.
Yeah. Try to explain color to a blind man. Yeah.
Right. We describe it and we keep trying to describe it, but gone for me is the religious stuff, which is having to convince you of a particular list, and you have to say it this way and quote it that way and believe this certain thing. And now we'll say you're good and we'll give you permission to go to heaven, as if we had that power in the first place.
That's what I love, is the submission to authority, the fact that nobody here is trying to say, I am the light, only through me, let me tell you, young men. And I've heard that my whole life, and it's so nice to finally not.
Yeah, we have one man, Jesus Christ, who is alive and well, and he can explain himself to anyone. They don't need my permission. He don't need my permission to do that. And I for me to put myself in any place where I'm gonna, have to stay between, or they can't understand, but that's arrogance. That's usurping the prerogative of God. The Bible calls that Antichrist. So
interesting. Is it almost time?
Well, John, are people just gonna get on this call? We don't have to switch calls, do we?
Yeah, we don't have to switch. They
Oh,
should be just hopping on this one.
Gonna wait and see if people show up. What's your next thought, Kenny?
Oh boy, yeah, we'll just keep hammering away at these.
Wow.
I'll just read what I got. I don't even know what I was thinking when I wrote this. God wants the best for humans, only if we choose him, or also if we don't choose him. Which is it?
God wants the best for humans only when we choose him, or even when we don't choose him.
Right, like the blessings of God fall on both. I wrote a little bit.
Yeah.
It makes more sense to me that God would want all to live well more than live in his choice.
Yes. I would say in your first part of your statement, God wants the best for everybody. That's true. Of everybody. Doesn't matter whether they want to know him or not. Now, defining what the best is, life can really only exist through connection with him. He actually gives everybody a temporary life so they have a chance to get to know him. That life can't continue. That's why we're called finite, right? But nonetheless, he wants the best for everybody. And he does make his rain fall on the good and the bad. And the sun comes up on everybody, whether they're good or bad. So there is a certain amount of what's called blessings that he provides to all. But then there's some blessing, and this is more connected to whether they want him or not for eternity. There is blessing that he cannot provide to them, such as life eternal, when they don't want him or don't want life. They really, what they're doing is rejecting life. They may not know that at this point, but he's not gonna make this misery of existence, meaning humans who are selfish, hurting and killing each other, go on for eternity. That's
Right.
not really what's best for them. It'd be better for them if they fully reject him to be in the grave for eternity than to go on with physical existence. So as long as that's kind of part of our perspective, I do know
Right.
he makes the sunshine on good and bad. So
Yeah, absolutely.
he loves all. He desires to fill all with life and joy and peace and happiness. But he also, love is so important that he won't cross the line into forcing that. So
Right.
that's where the choice part comes in.
Well, I guess that's where my fallacy comes into play. I guess not to challenge God or
Yeah,
anything,
go ahead.
but it's like clearly then, if there are people in heaven who knew and knew not of God, then we don't need God to get to heaven. We simply need to live good.
Okay. Is there more to that?
No, that's like I think it was Ellen White who said it, that there will be people in heaven
Yep.
who don't know God's face, don't know God's character, don't know him, but
Never
simply
heard the name of Jesus Christ.
right, and simply lived and did the best with what they had, feeling the idea or knowing or being taught, I'm not sure, the right way to live.
Well, I think that's where the breakdown comes. If she said they're there or not there because they did the best they could, then it really would be based on your merit. Your merit would get you there. So she actually doesn't say that. She
Okay.
does say that there will be many in heaven who never heard the name of Jesus, which makes me wonder, how'd they get there then?
Right.
Okay. So when we go after that piece of the answer, what we find is something, I'm going to simplify it so we can start the discussion. What we find is that, no, there are those who responded to the Spirit of God, or who would have if they had the right opportunity. What I mean by that is Jesus came and he lived, but that was for a short period of time. So how come Sodom and Gomorrah didn't get to see miracles and the work of Jesus, right?
It's
Well,
like that.
then look,
It's like that argument. Like, why did the guy get to stick his finger in Jesus' rib or through his holes in his hands or whatever? We don't. And even as he did it, he told him, he's like, you're able to experience something that no one else after you will be able to experience. And he even admitted to the that side of it. Yeah.
That's right. So if getting to heaven were based on whether you touched him in his side or not, then a lot of us are in trouble, right? So that's not what makes it work. He did say about Sodom and Gomorrah that
Girl, can you give me his bottle?
had they seen, meaning Sodom and Gomorrah, had they seen the miracles and the teachings that the Israelites got to see, some in Sodom and Gomorrah would have long since repented. All right. So what that tells me is that the real question is, did they or would they open their hearts to let God move in? Well, luckily, God can read the hearts long before they die or before they made a choice even, right? He knew us before we were born. So in that, I can trust that if there were those who didn't know the technicalities of religion or didn't know the term Jesus Christ or didn't hear those stories, but would surrender their hearts to God, he knows who they are and he can get them to the right place. This temporary battle or this existence is not about making sure everybody got all the info 100% and made 100% choice before they die. It's about enough of us going through that the universe can see, one, what the battle is, what's it over, how is it really won, who and why do they get to go to heaven or live for eternity versus not. Because Satan made it very confusing in the beginning. He said, for instance, he went back to heaven and before he caused Adam and Eve to sin, and he appeared to apologize, to repent, and ask for his position back. And Jesus, the way that is described there by Sister White in the story of redemption is that Jesus wept there as they met together in heaven. And he wept not because he wouldn't allow it, not because he was going to say, sorry, you sinned one too many times, therefore I can't let you in. He was weeping because he wished Lucifer was being honest. He wished that Lucifer was telling the truth, because if he was, then he'd let him right back in. But he knew Satan was deceiving the situation. And imagine how devious this is. So as soon as Jesus is weeping and has to say no, Satan can stand up and tell all of his followers and even the good angels, see, I told you, even if you beg, he won't let you back in. He's a harsh God. Well, this is more questions now in the minds of the universe. So go from there to Adam and Eve. Now, Adam and Eve at the tree, boom, they eat the fruit. And here comes God. And God wants to extend to them this opportunity. You were confused. You were deceived. You're going to have to learn about your choice, but I'm going to work it so you have the opportunity to change your mind, called repent, and come home. And immediately Lucifer said, no, that isn't fair. Look, I tried to repent. You wouldn't let me back in. How is it fair you let them back in? So the whole history, I'm wrapping it in real quick, that the whole history of the 6,000 plus years is about making sure those questions get answered deep into the universe. But God is not requiring that every human learned every speck of info and made a full, complete choice before they died. He can take care of the ones that those opportunities didn't work out yet. That was actually a preview to what we're supposed to study next, which is justice and mercy.
Oh, cool. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'll hang on to these. It looks like a lot of people are starting to show up here. Thank you. You actually answered a few of the other questions with that point. It's crazy. That's because we're digging into it, and I asked a religious person for answers, and faith. It's faith and understanding through faith.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is I don't mind, if you want to keep hammering away on questions, we can do this, for the next few weeks, get on early and hammer some more. And we are going to try to work on these bigger questions kind of all the time. So
I'd love it. It's totally selfish of me to do it, but if you're going to offer, then I'm gonna take full advantage of it. So
yeah, we can kind of just plan. I think that we'll get on at like 5:30, and then we'll start our study at 6:30. So
great.
Awesome. Hello, everybody else. Glad you're joining us. Who's all on here? I can't even tell.
Howdy.
Where's Sherry?
Hello, everyone.
Looks like Barb is here. Hi, Shady.
Hi.
Let's see. So just a quick review of our planning here. Sabbath afternoon this week, we're going to do, we're going to spend some time back on Revelation 12 again, is what I remember. And tonight we're doing Justice and Mercy. I know we had talked about doing the 2,300 days, the 1,260 days, and the 70 weeks. And then we were talking about this coming Friday. We didn't conclude on that though, right, John? As to when we're doing that?
I don't know, he's muted. Here,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go get some water. I'll be right
Yeah,
back.
go ahead. John, are you there? We must have lost John. He went to the restroom or something. Well, okay. So I think that as far as that goes, we probably should plan not to do it this Friday evening, just because I got to go to court tomorrow, way over in Republic, and I may not make it home in time. So Amber, I guess, is not on tonight either because she's gone. Anybody remember if we had talked about a topic for Sabbath, the 10:30 session?
Someone had questions that they had written down, and we were kind of.
I'm not sure.
Sorry about
I'm
that,
not sure.
Bobby. I was getting
That's okay.
some dinner.
That's
on a
okay.
plate.
I was just asking, we didn't conclude with Amber about this Friday night for the prophecy timelines, did we?
Yeah, basically she won't be here. I think she wanted to be, so.
Okay, well, let's maybe push that to the next Friday night, just because I don't know that I'll be back from Republic in time tomorrow anyway. So
Yeah.
then Sabbath, do we have a particular topic we're working on for Sabbath morning?
Not that I know of, and so I think we're kind of free to do whatever we want. It'd be good for me to have a topic I can email out to people so they know what we're going to talk about.
Anybody got some input on that?
I'm researching into angels, and I actually have a lot of questions about angels in particular.
Okay.
I actually like that. I've
Yeah,
always
you
kind
like
of
it.
wondered, like, how do they work with us? Do they whisper in our ears? Do they?
A lot of people got a lot of interesting ideas about that. There was something I picked up today that I thought was really interesting. There was actually this verse that talked about the 4 archangels that would be in charge of the world at the time of the end.
Yeah, that hold the 4 winds.
Yeah, and I was digging. Man, it gets, lack of a better word, crazy. It gets really crazy how they talk about it, and how they explain angels, fallen angels, and all kinds of stuff. It gets pretty deep.
Book, or where were you reading it?
Research. So I'm a college student, and I scour the internet and reputable sources. Yeah, anything I can find. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure that I would be prepared Sabbath to do too much helping with lots of answers about angels. I got some thoughts, but I don't know if I could fill an hour and a half with it. What about you, John? You got lots of research you've done on angels?
No, I have the same questions.
No.
My question has always been, I mean, I know that they're used, right? It talks about how they, travel back and forth. They do the bidding of the Lord, and all of heaven has been poured out in the work of salvation of man.
Some of them got swords with flames shooting off of them. Like, what in the world, Yeah.
So
well, the difficult, there's not a lot in the Bible gives us too much information about it. So there's lots of speculation out there, but okay. Well, unless anybody else got another idea for Sabbath morning, I guess put some thought to it and maybe send you an idea tonight, John. I don't mind working on the angel question. I think you better give me a chance though to collect some info to help out with whatever info you're finding. So,
I do have another big question I've been thinking about that pertains to religion, which was kind of cool because we actually hit on it a little bit today with tradition. And I wanted to, because I've never really had it explained to me, the point of communion, the point of actually going through all of that as being kind of a staple for Western religion as a tradition.
well, that's an interesting one. What could we do with communion? We could maybe connect it into a discussion about ceremonial law, sacrifices, which the Old Testament version would have been sacrifices, because the priest ate some of the meat of the lamb, and then the New Testament version would be the bread and the wine, right? So we could do something with that probably.
You could work in baptism as a ceremony versus,
Sure, our modern.
and
I'd like to hear that. Yeah.
Okay, I don't mind that. That sounds good. I can be ready for that. Okay, so let's see. We're going to do justice and mercy tonight. Let me have a prayer, and then John can put up for us. You're going to do the drawing or whatever for us for justice and mercy tonight, John?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll just do it on the whiteboard.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's have a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your love and your grace and just the opportunity to exercise our minds over what you've said and what you've done, that we can evaluate it, that we can come to know you and actually have a chance to evaluate and decide if you're a God that we want to follow, to love, and to obey. And we thank you for that invitation. And just lead us tonight in our thoughts as we discuss justice and mercy. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so feel free, anybody, to jump in and interrupt with comments or questions. I'm on my phone, so I can't hardly see too much of what's going on, but I'll talk until somebody tells me to stop. How about that? A quick review. Last week we did love, forgiveness, healing, wrath. And the idea, summary of the idea of that is that God's love is so fair, so balanced, so completely towards us in that he will love us whether we want him to or not. He'll forgive us whether we want him to or not. He desires to rescue and save us, which would bring us into eternal life. But he loves us enough that if we refuse that, he will let us go. He will let go and let us separate ourselves from him. And ultimately that results in death. So that's the summary of love, forgiveness, healing, and wrath. I guess the component about the wrath is simply that wrath is not him losing his temper. It's him letting go, even though the results might be bad for us, ultimately death. But in that, I see a complete fairness to God, if you will, completely fair. And so then the question kind of follows, well, if he's so fair, so loving, then how does this whole thing with judgment and, how do some get to heaven and some don't? And is he picking fairly? I mean, that's our obvious next question is how does that system of judgment work? So on the left side there where John's drawing, you got to have two center boxes there at the top, John. Because in the first box on the left side there, we're going to put, pull those down a little ways. Put a second one up there. The first box, we're going to put the word convict. And Kenny, especially since this is a new one for you, I'm just going to kind of have you help me through on this discussion. What we're after is just a quick picture of how the two words in our minds, justice and mercy, how they normally work. What do we think they mean? And so in this context, like I'm going to court tomorrow, right? There's going to be a judge. So in this system, we're going to have a convict. And this convict, which means the jury has found them guilty, all the evidence has been presented. It's clear, not just a maybe he's guilty. It's clear, 100% guilty. And when guy is convicted, 100%, then the next step is he's brought before a judge. And the judge is going to determine, what's the consequence? What's the penalty? What's going to happen to this convict? And so we'll put judge right there. And then pull those other two boxes down a ways. Give yourself some room so we can draw out to the left side. And we'll put two consequences or two results here the judge can pick from. The one on the left will be of free, can set this convict free. And the other extreme other consequence would be, let's say, send him to jail, life in prison. So let's say this is a murder case. He committed 3 murders. Same witnesses saw all 3. All the witnesses agree, 100% guilty. Now the judge has to decide what to do. So when we use the words justice and mercy, Kenny, which one would you say would send the convict free or set the convict free? Would that be justice or mercy?
Both.
Both?
Yep. I believe that justice and mercy are the exact same thing.
Oh, so you already did this study.
No, I have never seen it like this.
Really?
But I have talked about justice and mercy a lot, mostly in my military, when I became a non-commissioned officer and I learned about judgment. Younger ranking enlisted, they don't really deal with that kind of stuff. They just kind of deal with the system like the UCMJ and whatever else. But in advanced leadership school that we went to, we talked a lot about mercy and judgment. And it was interesting because back then I justice, get that, dude, whatever. And mercy, of course, would be free. But when you're talking about a system of rules, of society, they're the same thing. It's
that's pretty awesome. In fact, might get done with this early and have you explain how in the world they arrived at that. But we'll finish the study. Don't worry. But that's really cool because as you just said, the norm, like just say the TV watcher, who sits at home and passes judgment and all kind of things. We say mercy is a lighter sentence. Maybe set him free as opposed to go to jail. Maybe let him live instead of death penalty. But either way, justice and mercy don't agree in our minds. In fact, the Webster's Dictionary says justice is to receive the due penalty, and mercy is to receive a lighter penalty, something less than the due penalty. So if you stole $10 and the rule was, the law said you had to pay back the 10 plus another 10. Okay, that means you owe 20. That would be the due penalty. But if a judge was lenient and he said, well, I know you're poor, so you have to pay back 5 of the 20. Then that we would call generally mercy or a lighter sentence, right? So underneath there, John, if you put justice, a J, justice equals you get what you deserve. Or we go further down below our boxes. Yeah, justice says you get what you deserve. So justice equals deserve. And mercy equals what you don't deserve or less of a sentence, right? So they're going in opposite directions. So somehow, Kenny, you already learned this from a military perspective. What's amazing is that here in religion, where we're supposed to study the justice and mercy of God, we still don't have that figured out. We still think that God is either going to give justice to the sinner or mercy to the sinner, but he can't do both, right? So on the right side, we're going to build the biblical model, what I call the biblical model, and then Kenny can help us understand how in the world the military got this figured out. But we're going to, instead of a convict, we're going to put sinner in that box. Sinner, 100% guilty. So guilt is already determined. We don't have to start over and have a whole court case. It's 100% guilty. Now here comes the fun Bible study part, Kenny, and that is that who is the judge? And you can either answer that from your old previous religious training or something you've learned since then. You say judge is.
So when we're talking about sin, it's obviously religion.
Yep.
So I would say that it's the Holy Trinity, right? Like God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit.
Okay, all three of them. That's pretty good perspective.
Yeah.
You would say, though, that a lot of people in religion kind of have the idea it's the almighty, powerful Father.
The wrath. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we teach this idea that good thing we have an intercessor called Jesus who steps in between us, and we think to calm the almighty Father down a little bit, or to make him have a little more mercy, like he's going to talk God into giving us a little more time, right? You've heard that idea before. So to biblically prove what you just said, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, we're going to do a couple of verses. The first one is John 5:22. John 5:22. And somebody who's looked that up or is looking that up, if you could read for us John 5:22. And you can put judge equals God. Well, I guess you're keeping it out of the box because we're going to put something more in the box. Okay, go ahead. Anybody want to read that verse for us?
I can read it.
Okay, go for it.
John 5:22.
Yep.
For the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son.
Thank you, Barb. So here's Jesus talking in John 5:22, and he says this shocking thing to Israelites because they were just sure that God was the almighty judge. And Jesus says the Father judges no one. He's going to let me do that. And the reason that would be exciting to a Jew or a Hebrew who was also a sinner, like, let's say, Mary Magdalene, is because they believed or were taught that, being that great of a sinner, there was no hope for them. And God would judge them as a sinner and a Gentile and sentence them to death or Gehenna or hell. And so for someone like Mary Magdalene, to hear Jesus say, the Father is going to let me do the judging, that would cause exciting hope in someone like her. Or someone like Peter after he denied Jesus, right? Or Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector, and therefore he was eternally lost, according to the religious leaders, teachers. They would hear this and go, wow, this guy Jesus, he's so kind and gracious and nice. And if he gets to be the judge, there's a possibility of hope for me. Does that make sense, Kenny?
Yeah, it does. I'm actually kind of shocked myself. I'd never heard that before. That he actually just handed it to Jesus, but it makes sense. I mean, he's the one who came down and died for our sins, lived amongst us, and honestly, I'm actually kind of happy about that.
Yeah.
It's a good prospect. He's a pretty loving dude.
Just this relief, right? Because Jesus may understand us better than the Father, or he might have more patience, because that's still connected to our old idea. But you're right. It should evoke in us a little bit of, oh, wow, I kind of dig that idea. But now we're going to see what else Jesus had to say about this same topic. So we're going to go to John 12, 46 and 47. Shady, you want to read this one for us?
Yeah, I'm on my way there.
Oh,
what is it? John what?
12, John 12.
John
46.
John 12.
46 and 47.
Okay. I have come as a light to shine in this dark world so that all who put their trust in me will no longer remain in the dark. I will not judge those who hear me but don't obey me, for I have come to save the world and not to judge it.
All right, so this is even more amazing than the last one. The last Father's not going to judge you. Now Jesus adds, oh yeah, and by the way, I'm not going to judge you either, because I didn't come here to judge you. I came here to rescue and save you. Now it's amazing that he says in this verse, I will not judge those who hear me and don't listen, or hear me and reject me, which is, that's the wicked ones. That's the ones like Judas. But he says, yeah, I'm not even going to judge them, which is a little shocking. Although, if you hold your finger in John 12 and flip real quick to John 3, we know what verse 16 says, which is, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. But what does John 3:17 say? You want to read this one, Kenny?
That whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life.
And the next verse, 18?
I don't know, 18.
Oh, you're quoting. Oh, good for you. Who knows 18 either by quote or read it?
Whosoever
There-
believes is already alive.
What's that? John 3:18.
He that believeth in him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God.
Okay, so back up and read 17 and 18 together. We'll get the whole picture.
For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God.
So taken all together, John 3 is saying God, the Father, the great Almighty, loved you so much that he sent his Son down here to convince you of that. So that whoever would believe what? Believe that God is like Jesus said he was, would never perish, but would have eternal life. Oh, and then he adds, God did not send his Son down here to judge the world or condemn the world, but to save and rescue the world. And then he who is rejects me, or he who is doesn't believe the truth, he's judged already. But it doesn't say judged by who. It just says he's judged already. We normally assume he means, well, he didn't send the Son to judge, so the Son's not going to judge. But based on if you reject Jesus, then God the Father, he's going to judge you. We sort of write that in together in our minds, but it doesn't actually say that. In fact, read one more verse, somebody. Verse
19, is that what
Yep.
you're wanting?
Yep, 19.
And this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil.
All right, so that verse adds in sequence that this is the way judgment works, or some versions say this is the judgment. That one says this is the condemnation, or how condemnation works. Light has come, but some love darkness more than the light. Now, who judges that? Who decides who loved the light and who hated the light?
We do.
Okay, so we'll go back to John 12, right where we stopped, and look at verse 48. So we read 46, 47 said, the ones who reject, he's not going to judge them. And verse 48 kind of tops off the question here.
48, he who rejects me and does not receive my words has that which judges him. The word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day.
All right. So, Kenny, what that one's saying is the word or the message or what Jesus taught. That's what's going to judge in this light has come, but everyone has, do they love the light or do they want to reject the light? And you're right. You end up judging yourself basically, or deciding. You're the one that decides. Do you love the light? That's what Peter decided. And then Judas, he decided, no, I hate the light. So let's put in that box there, John, just for our conclusion, that the way judgment works, or the judge itself, is the truth about God, which is the message Jesus spoke. We'll just put truth about God. And then here's where your choosing comes in. Right below our big box there, we're going to put the word choice. Right up, yeah, right there. Okay, now based on your choice, you're going to end up in one of two places, or there's going to be two options. And so the idea of God's jail or his reform school, that will be on the right. So let's do the left one. First on the left would be, grace. We're going to put the word grace. This is God's jail or his reform school, the way he heals us, changes us, saves us. That's one option. And that leads to, underneath there, eternal life. We'll put the word life. And on the right, that option is going to be what Satan said we needed to be free. He said to be free, you need to trust yourself, or trust Satan, or trust anybody but God. So you need to go free from grace, or disconnected from life. So free from grace goes in the next box. And that leads to death is the result of that direction. So then this is easy to put together real quick, Kenny, based on once we figure out who the judge is or how judgment works. It simply goes like this. Sinner, 100% guilty. Justice says he should receive death. So we'll put a J down to the right. And mercy says we could offer him life. That'd be down the left side. But if we put in the concept of how judgment works in those verses in John, we have to have choice part of this formula. So it'd go like this. Sinner comes to see the truth about God, all that God has to offer, life and love with him for eternity. And if someone chooses to reject that, the question we should ask is, would it be merciful for God to let them go and give them over unto death? Can we put an M down the right side? Now, Kenny already said yes to this question, right, Kenny?
Yeah, I stand by what I said.
Keep standing there. Because then the other side would say, then if the sinner comes to see the truth about God and then chooses to accept God, to let God work in his heart and mind, transforming him and giving him life, that would be just. That would be fair. There's nothing unfair about extending life, even though they sinned, walked away from God, rejected God because they didn't know. Jesus said, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And in the garden, when Adam and Eve chose sin, they didn't really fully know what they were choosing. Lucifer in heaven, he had walked up and down, according to Ezekiel, he had walked up and down in the stones of fire. He lived in the presence of the Almighty. He knew and understood the love and the character and the mercy of God. Knowing that goodness, he chose then not only to reject it, but to start lying to heavenly beings about what it really was, to misrepresent it. So his choice was final as far as like rejecting unto death, because Lucifer already knew the truth. But many others did not. Even angels who followed him did not fully understand. So God, in his wisdom, knew that if he put down this rebellion by physical warfare and force, all he would do is prove Satan right, that God was a harsh God and he enacted justice, but he didn't have any mercy. So instead, God said, I will reveal my truth to you. Thus he sent the Son, which John, I think, is putting the cross there. Yeah. So he revealed his truth through his Son so that all could see, come to know, and understand. And once that occurs, which really won't be until we have the event called the third, I call it the third coming, meaning the whole story is told again, both wicked and righteous will be there. Everybody will have a chance to see again the entire story and what took place. And then all those who choose to reject God for eternity, both justice and mercy will agree to give them over to death. And those who accept God's offer of grace and eternal life, justice and mercy will both agree that it is right to give life to any who will come back and surrender their life to God. So you were correct from the beginning, Kenny. It's those of us who got all confused in the religious thing on the left side of the chart that are having so much trouble figuring it out. And here's what happens on the right. In the bottom there, John, if you'd put J equals and then M equals, on this system, the way it works out is that justice is you receive what you choose, and mercy is you receive what you choose. Therefore, all I want you to put there, John, is J equals and M equals, and then put the word love. Because the conclusion is both justice and mercy equal love. On the left side, we argue around in circles in court and newspaper reporters, and we can't figure out, should we have more justice or more mercy? And we never seem to get to love. We get to revenge or we get to leniency, but we never really get to what real love is. All right, any questions about that, Kenny, or anybody else?
A story came up in my head about something that I usually tell younger airmen fresh off the bus, as we call it, or coming straight from basic training. So they go to basic training and then they go to tech school, they kind of learn their job, and then they show up in the real military, and we put them to work. So when you get these young airmen in, they're going to be late, they're going to cuss and swear, they're going to mess stuff up, they're going to wreck vehicles, they're going to screw up. It's going to happen. We all do it. To human is to err. So one of my things that I usually told them is when they started going down that path again of blaming other things and coming up with excuses for justice and mercy about to take place as I omit my staff sergeant wrath upon them, I would remind them of a very simple concept we were all taught. And the concept goes like this. Airmen forgot to set their alarm, goes to sleep because they had 12 beers last night, and they show up to work looking like a bag of ass, excuse me, and the first thing they do is go up to their supervisor and they say, sorry, I'm late, I forgot to set my alarm. Now, the interesting thing I've noticed is being back in the civilian world again and seeing things, it's a, slap on the wrist and life goes on and bygones be bygones, but not in the military. We hold them accountable for that because we teach that it is not their phone that is the problem, it is them. They are responsible for getting here, not their phone. They are responsible for making sure that they don't drink the night before, not the beer. It's people are so good nowadays at blaming other things that are not even things for the reasons and justifications for the actions that they take and the things that they don't get to do. And we're very strict about that. It's ingrained into our skull that we are responsible for our own outcomes, not the world. So, yeah.
Good. So it's kind of like justice. Well, justice, it might feel like justice right now because I'm having to clean the latrines because I blamed it on my phone. The mercy comes into play that later I grew up a little bit and became an adult. Is that kind of the idea?
Absolutely. Taking responsibility for your actions, the good and the bad, accepting what you are is the first step of becoming something greater than you've ever been.
Good. So in the biblical model, there's going to be a little bit of differences, but still the justice and mercy are combined, which is cool that you had that to start with. The one of the differences will be, well, let me say a similarity first. A similarity first is the idea of confession is to take responsibility for this is my fault. I am this problem. I am selfish. I am critical. I'm judgmental. I'm not naturally nice. I prefer revenge to kindness, right? And so that's the sort of the confession part of owning this is me. Somebody else didn't make me like this. This is me. The grace part comes in that consequences are not just removed. Like, in fact, a false religion, a false Christian belief is that, you did all these things wrong, but luckily Jesus died and paid it all off. So now you're no longer responsible for what you did. That actually is a fallacy that has caused atheists and other religions to see Christianity as stupid. And they're correct about that. If that were Christianity, I would say, yeah, it doesn't even make sense to a sinful view of fairness and justice. So in this case, like you'll notice we put the cross next to the revealing the truth, not down. Usually people want to put it down the line to make mercy possible, right? No, not in this concept. The cross, which was the shedding of blood, which was an expensive payment, which did take care of a deficit or a prison we were in by breaking the prison doors open and setting us free. But free from what? Free from lies about God. So this is about revealing the truth. Free from, ultimately, if I surrender to it, free from what makes me sin, what makes me selfish and destructive and an unkind, ungrateful human being. So the cross is about a solution that starts with the revealing of God. And then if we go down the left side, it's about the moving of God into our hearts. If we go down the right side, it's still about the revealing of God, but then it's about God withdrawing and letting the person go unto death. And the universe can then stand up and say without question, Satan lied about God. Satan misdirected us. God is not just or merciful. He is both simultaneously. And it'll be loving and fair. As you were bringing up the question about, how did some get there and didn't even know Jesus' name? Well, because again, in God's system, it's not based on did they know the right language or did they know the right title or did they know how to repeat the prayer properly? It's about did they open their hearts and let God move in. And based on that, he will get them where they should end, where they should go. And deserve kind of goes right out the window on the right side of these two charts, because suddenly the judgment isn't based on what you deserve, or we're all toast, right? And so Webster, I don't mean to suggest that Webster was stupid. He was writing down how we use the word. We've just been incorrect in our understanding of what the word means. And so anyway, this thing for me, and then I'll let anybody else jump in here and talk or share as you'd like. For me, this made the huge difference between seeing God as somebody who we should be afraid of because he loses his temper now and again and starts whacking people, to one who is working constantly for our good and wanting to bring to me more good. And he wants me to taste and see and know that he's good. And if I will, he will work in me to will and to do his good pleasure. And if I want, if I like Judas say, yeah, but you know what? I don't like that kind of program. I want revenge and steal and pillage. God will respect that, and he will let us go. And while we might have a temporary existence to do a little bit of that, ultimately the result of God letting go in the end will be death. And it'll be the most merciful thing he can do for those people. Usually I talk a little bit about the third coming. I won't say too much tonight unless someone has any specific question, except to say again that that's the moment after the second coming and after the 1,000 years where the wicked are in the grave, not conscious, not burning somewhere. And then the righteous, those who have chosen God, are with him for 1,000 years. Then there's going to be, God, are you sure? I mean, this is so good. This is so amazing. Now that we've seen it for 1,000 years, are you sure Grandma or Uncle Fred or whoever, if they just saw this, wouldn't they change their mind? And that question must be answered. And so God will raise all of them, all the rejectors of his grace, all at once. They will immediately come up to war against the city, hoping to destroy God and take it over. But God will put a stop to their attack by pouring out a revelation of himself and the entire story onto them. They will be transfixed as they have to take in the whole story, its meaning, who God has always been, who Lucifer was, what Lucifer said as he turned into Satan, each person on the earth, the crucifixion, the life of Christ, the whole thing. And the question will be hanging in the air as that comes to a conclusion, because even the wicked, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that he is Lord, that he's true, that he's just, and all his ways are right. Even the wicked are going to say that. And the question will be, God, are they changing their mind? Are they turning? And then that question is going to get answered. We will see who of the ones God, put in the second resurrection, who he brought up in the second resurrection. Did he make any mistakes? Did he put someone there that ultimately would rather be with God? And either way, at the end, it'll be clear to the universe, nobody is rejected or lost or saved even simply by some arbitrary decision on God's part. He has worked in fairness to reveal himself, and it's up to each individual. Will they or will they not bow the knee and surrender their hearts to God? So that's the whole deal. Anybody got any thoughts or questions on that?
I never get tired of hearing that.
Hey, Charlie.
Hi.
Wendell has a comment.
Hey guys and gals.
Hey, Wendell.
Hey, I'm sorry I've been away. I was off island visiting a daughter in Kona. So just a thought on the concept of surrender. You mentioned that word, and I don't know, about 7 minutes ago, before brother talked about the airmen. Just that, sort of the idea of what does that involve? Surrender, kind of has this war like surrender, the enemy surrenders or one side surrenders to the other, that sort of thing, right? And, these are concepts, we've grown up with. But resonating sometimes, I think, is kind of more of how it might work. In music, you have our harmonic resonance, right? And then things sound good. When things are not in tune, they don't sound good, right? They become dissonant. So just that kind of idea, and I think to use a non-humanities type of topic, you can look at science, medical science, and when a patient wants to cooperate with the physician, his physician, then there's some good things that can happen. And it's likely that if he follows what the physician says, you actually don't really need much of the law or much of the diagnostic type of applications that are brought in. I mean, you know, they're done annually for physical or what have you, but you know, if you're healthy, that kind of thing just reveals that you're healthy. You know, I mean, it's not bad news. It's usually, you know, it's, you know, usually good news if you want it, you know.
Good. I would suggest, Wendell, that resonance or resonating, like you were talking about the instrument, is what occurs after the surrender. And what I mean by that is, as I was listening to your thought about resonating means I got to tune the instrument so mine is tuned to yours, or we're going to have a bad sound. But for me to tune my instrument to you, I have to first surrender to your instrument being the standard. And the reason I think, at least in my mind, why that's important is that the concept of God and the devil, or truth and error, the word picture is pretty strong all through the Bible. It's war. This is war. And so sometimes we use war language like surrender. But I think the cool thing is this is not surrender in the context of, let's say, one culture going to war against another culture, and the second culture, because they're losing, they have to so-called surrender, but they really always mumble under their breath, like the Jews did about the Romans. They hated the Romans being there. They didn't want the Romans there. They were sort of captured against their will. That's not what this surrender means. This surrender is more like me surrendering my guitar to have to match or be tuned to your guitar. But if I want to say mine is correct and mine is right and everybody needs to tune to me, then I don't need to do any surrender. You all need to do the surrender. And so I think with God, it is kind of helpful in my mind to say really what this is about then is he's revealing his truth. And then I have to decide, is my standard better than his standard of character, or is his the one that we really need? And if so, first I'm going to have to surrender that mine's no good, his is great. But I need more than that. I need now for him to tune my heart to match his heart. That's the new covenant promise of the, you know, take out the stony heart and put in a heart of flesh, a soft heart, moving us from law-based sort of religion to actually heart-filled, be like Jesus kind of activity. So kind of like using those two together a little bit. I've never used the word resonance before, but I kind of like it. Thank you.
Well, I mean, as a follow-up to that, you know, when two people decide to get married to each other, there is a giving up of the other options. So I choose you and you choose me. So there's a surrender of plan B, C, and D, or what have you. But you know, of course, they're smitten by affection for each other, usually, not all the time. By the way, it's a really great Netflix show called Indian Matchmaking. You know, from the country India, and there's two types of marriages that they explore. One is what they call arranged marriage, and the second one is called love marriage. And it's just fascinating. You know, it's just very cultural how they pair people up, and how the matchmakers, you know, the tools that they have and whatnot. But anyways, you know, so the idea, I think, I don't want to juxtaposition this with the idea of how we might see power today, right? And especially in the political realm, right? You know, there's rhetoric and all kinds of things that suggest a bent reality sometimes, and a reality that is kind of formed by words, and either we comply with it, or we choose to examine it and go, well, what is the reality first? So I sort of wonder now, if I lead, quote unquote, lead somebody to Christ today, what does that mean to surrender? And how sort of like the Nicodemus thing, right? How does he come to a place where he says, I've tasted and I've seen, and it's a radical transformation of being born again? I struggle with that a little bit, because I understand it's a war, and I understand what you're talking about, Bobby, and it has good validity, and at the same time, I wonder how love works in drawing us so that we're steadfast and we leave other stuff behind.
And I think that's partly why the surrender or submit word is really useful, because different than going to the doctor. Let's use that one. We go to the doctor, and the doctor says, look, to really be healthy, you need to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And we get a quick converted, or not converted, but translation into you need to do. And so it's your responsibility now to go home and do. And if we apply just that much to the spiritual, like the thing with Nicodemus, then Jesus didn't tell him the right stuff. What he should have done is tell them more like the rich young ruler. Well, what you need to do is sell your barn and all that stuff, give him a list. That would be more like the doctor concept all by itself. But again, I think what we really got in true Christianity is not just a submission or a surrender to what the truth is, but now having to submit and surrender to a power outside of ourselves that is the only power that can transform my heart. It's one thing to do what the doctor said because I'm sick. Submit to the doctor because I'm going to die. So now I got to do what the doctor says. It's a different thing to submit to the doctor because I fully agree with he knows what he's talking about and he's describing the best way, and my insides hate that way. Now I'm really stuck because he said I should eat, green beans and spinach and cabbage and Brussels sprouts, all of which I hate. So now I'm either going to have to just grin and bear it, make myself do it so that I can live. Or what if the doctor could actually do something where he changes my taste, changes my desire, changes my want? That's both to will and to do with good pleasure. So there is this element of need to submit to him or surrender to him to even accomplish what I now do agree, which is character, right, that I should be like. And so we have submission to truth, and then we have submission to a power to accomplish what we cannot accomplish. Without those two things, you really will never get resonance. Like a couple, you were saying, that are going to submit to each other, which is right and proper. But you'll notice how many people promise to do that, and then they never get resonance. They never get where they're really becoming one. They're still fighting for my way is better than your way. And so that's not really what marriage is. Without the actual submission and surrender, you're never going to get a resonance. But anyway, just some more thoughts.
Yeah, that's good. I like what you said about, a changing of taste, a changing of perspective, a changing of something that's so innate that we come with. And gosh, I'm not like that anymore, right?
Right.
The old has passed away. Maybe what Paul is saying there is the old sensory system has passed away.
Yeah, the old desires, the old wants, the old nature selfishness, essentially. When that's passed away, we have unselfishness implanted in us by God. Wow, that's gonna, life will suddenly get amazing and wonderful and fun.
Oh,
Good
thanks for that. Yeah.
That's a great question. I always like clarifying that stuff even a little more. So thanks, Wendell.
I would have to say on what does it mean to submit, or what does it look like? The things that God asks us for, if you want to call it, in transformation, or to be in tune, or to be in harmony with Him. The things that we give up that feel as if we were dying to give them up are the very things that are killing us. So when He's asking us to give something up, it's not out of a self-centered reason at all. It's actually in our best interest. He's asking us to give up these things that are killing us. And it's not possible to even realize that or even understand that at first glance. It's not human nature.
Yeah, because if
It's
you
like
really,
my analogy of my dog that likes eating dead deer in my backyard, and it keeps ralphing over and over. It can't get over that. It's a dog. That's how we think.
well, and if you really wanted to give those things up, there wouldn't be much surrender to it, right? So you were correct
Yes.
in the perspective of, we don't want to give them up at first. We don't want those things. We don't want righteousness. So the word surrender is a correct way to put it, because it's going to feel like you're giving up life itself.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, these are concepts, and if you're in really rough water and you surrendered your will to the lifeguard, and if you submitted your body and became limp and stopped fighting against the current and whatnot, the lifeguard could save you. You know, I mean, so there's these. It's just weird because English language doesn't have always the mechanism to understand something with a single word. Because when you say submit, I think about wrestling. You know, submission. You know, you tap out, you get pinned. You know, okay, I give up. You know, but submission or submitting also means to submit your application. It means to submit your homework or turn something in, right? That sort of thing. To exhibit, to transact an exhibition. You know, so it's almost like you guys know the word kuleana, right? In Hawaiian, I mean, if you just Google kuleana, Kuleana, it's used almost as much as aloha might be used, and it has so many meanings, but it's both a burden and an opportunity at the same time. So if something is my kuleana, it usually means my responsibility, like chores or, you know, something like that I gotta do. But while it is responsibility or burden that I must do, it's also my opportunity. So that's the thing that a lot of times trips me up with, you know, at least in today's world, about power and how it's exhibited in America. You know, some of these concepts, you know, they're not as clear as I think they could be.
Yeah, and it's a good example, Wendell, because it is true. That's why it's so fun to discuss it, but to figure out, yeah, what do we really mean? Because this,
Right.
like for me, an early one was that word commitment. I grew up in a culture where, you know, every other weekend or so, we'd be having an altar call and being told we should commit our lives to Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, I did that 6 times already, and I'm not even sure what that means.
Yeah.
Because to me, commit meant to make a promise. I'm going to commit myself to doing this activity. I commit myself to Jesus, which means promise. I'm going to stop sinning. I know I promised that before and it didn't work, but I'm going to promise it again every other week or whatever, right? And so this idea of commitment became sort of an obstacle to actually
Yeah.
what my faith was, a real relationship with Jesus, until I saw a different view of the word itself, which was to commit myself over to, like when you commit or submit your paper to the teacher, you're actually giving it over. Well, now I was like, wait a minute, you mean so I'm supposed to give my life over to Christ? I thought I was supposed to make bigger promises and perform better. And it's the same exact word. So I had to learn a different meaning to the idea of committing myself to Jesus. And part of it is the way it was presented. It was clearly the Make the Promise program. And but later I looked at that word in the dictionary and saw, wow, this word could actually be used in a much better way, which is, that's where, to me, I started learning the words submit, surrender, give over to. For instance, tap out. You use that idea of tapping out as a surrender, which even Jacob, when he wrestled, in one way you could say he never tapped out. He did get his hip put out of socket, and he switched from fighting God off to grabbing a hold and hanging on, but I wouldn't call that tapping out. But I would say he switched from defending himself and fighting God off to surrendering to the angel to bless him. But you could still describe that as, and he hung on for dear life. He didn't surrender the fight in the sense of, letting go of the opportunity for blessing. So around we go with words, which is why it's always important to understand, especially when we're doing Bible studies, that what matters most is what's the meaning. What do you mean? What do I mean with these words? Getting stuck over certain exact words, good or bad, that's really not useful. And so what I mean is there are people in religion who will say, for instance, that only King James. You don't read any other versions of King James. And they think that because we have to have those words exactly that way. And yet they don't even understand what it's saying, but they're just sure that's the only way to say it. So that's not useful.
Yeah, and I think some of what we can rely on is that a big picture thing, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that God didn't write any of the Bible, of what's in the Bible, except what his finger wrote was the 10 Commandments on stone tablets. And so he trusts man to tell about man's experiences and to interpret God in whatever language or whatever inspiration they had, and to write it down. I mean, wouldn't it have been just clear if he wrote the manual in all of our languages and said, here are the instructions, but he didn't, which to me is a testimony that he has this kind of like this complete fair play, like beyond fair, actually, to favor us, to say, well, write down what you see and how you feel about this, and you need some poetry. Okay, well, there's some Psalms there and that sort of thing. However I can communicate with you, and you tell the story. I think in man's words, God's picture of everything becomes even more powerful because he defers to man to do it.
And yet he also inspires man what to say, but what about what you're saying important is that he didn't inspire him to say it in English or Spanish even, right? It was said first in Hebraic. So there still has to be this part you're talking about where man work at transposing or translating, and what God does with the inspiration part is he makes that in every language, in every tongue, the meaning is still, and that's where he governs what it says, but not the words. He's not stuck on you got to say that word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Anything else from anybody?
I just really like what you said there, Wendell. I know kind of rabbit trailed what we were going from, but I just, it's amazing to me how much God has condescended and given the universe full access to judge him, whether it's right or
Mhm.
wrong.
Mhm.
It's not if you want to call it a top down.
Mhm.
He doesn't seem to run it like what you would consider a god to run it. If you watch any kind of God or the gods movies or whatever. So, like I was just reading in the Bible about Cornelius. He was a Roman centurion right after not long after Jesus went back to heaven. He's a Roman centurion, and an angel comes and visits him from heaven. And he says, "Go and see Peter." And he tells him where he's staying, and he will tell you the way to salvation. Why didn't the angel tell him? That's pretty amazing that the only message that the angel was coming to give, hey, this goes to your Kenny, to your interest in the angels. So the angel, being a messenger, he only came and presented this message of go and see Peter, and Peter did come at much anguish to himself. God actually gave him a vision to even tell him it was okay to go to this Gentile's place. But when he gets there, then Peter is the one to explain the way to salvation and what had happened. Though the angel, of course, had seen way more than Peter had. It's pretty amazing that he gives us that privilege and that honor, the distinction of being the bearer of the news. And he says, if these children were not to cry out, the rocks would cry out. I know there's more explanation for that, but what a dishonor it would be if we didn't take that privilege of sharing what he's given us. It's the greatest honor in the universe to do what we're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it really leaves me breathless. That, like I said, there's more than fair play, and I think that if we are to understand love as being deferential and preferring the other, then we might get a picture of how power and authority on the grandest scale, really works. And I mean, it's so upside down compared to all the Southern Baptist fire and brimstone messages I've heard in my life, or Assemblies of God, and so forth. And I mean, those are my experiences. I mean, had I gone to an SDA church, I would have included them too in it, But like Graham Maxwell says, it's almost like the good news is that God is not how his enemies have made him out to be, and the discovery of that is kind of amazing,